go down your list. So now you're going, all right, 1 green, 2 yellow, red, 3 red, so on and so forth. And as you're going down, all we're doing is we're writing down anything that's not green. And then when you're done, we move to the next person.
Wow. Okay.
And then when everybody's done with their reports, now we can circle back and say, okay, all of our reds, what are the most critical? And then they say, okay, these are the most critical. Great. What do we need to do to get your red back on track? Oh, well, I need this, this, and this. Great. Can you guys help with these things? And all it's doing is it's helping the team communicate with one another.
All right, welcome to Hawaii Real, everybody. I'm your host, Ioke Ehu. And if you have not yet, please subscribe to this channel. It's going to help us so much on YouTube. And if you are just one of those awesome listeners to the audio versions on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, hey, do us a favor. Share this episode on one of your social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Can we do TikTok yet? I don't know. But you can also follow us on Instagram at hawaii.real.podcast. And you can always go to the website, hawaiirealpodcast.com, where I have all the short videos that I post and all of the audio versions of the podcast. You can listen to them directly from that website. Again, that's hawaiirealpodcast.com. Oh, yeah. All right. Today I have a cool guest, Mr. Mike Roura. I want to roll the R.
Do it. Just go with it.
Roura. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good.
And he brought the goatee.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
I like it. It's like it's full.
It protects me from the microphone. That whole social distancing.
I wish I could have a mic goatee. When I was in college, I had a full one just like that. It wasn't as long, but yeah. It was full.
My wife actually, she has to groom it for me. Because normally what I do is I just let it go.
Give me your man card. Give me your man
well, it's funny because I let it go, and when I let it go, she says that I look scary. And so like she's like, nobody wants to talk to you when you have your goatee down to your mid waist and
you're
just
walking
tell
her, I know kung fu.
Actually, she's a 2-time Golden Glove boxing champion.
So that wouldn't help. Yeah, she's like, I'll knock your ass out anyway. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. So you're the owner of BAIG LLC.
Yes, co-owner, yes.
Co-owner. Okay. Just briefly, what does that organization do? And how did you guys get started in that? BAIG,
it's an acronym for Business Advisory and Insurance Group. It was kind of started with Carlos and I sitting down one day, just going back and forth about all of the different stuff that we do. And it turns out that he and I have done a lot of the same stuff for a very long time. It's just, we haven't put a name to it or anything like that. And so as we were kind of discussing everything, we're like, well, how about we call it, as it started out with Badass Insurance Guys.
I like that name better. And I'm telling you, you should stick with that name. But
and that's kind of where it morphed because my background, as well as Carlos, is all business advisory. And for me, I've been in the insurance industry for, almost 20 years now. And so, but I've done a lot of more corporate planning on the insurance side of things, where we focus on things like, key man policies and helping people get out of business. And so all of my training has always been helping companies and all of that fun stuff. But what got me into all of that was the life insurance side of things, actually. As funny as it is. So fast forward a little bit, rewind rather. Okay. I grew up, without a dad. My father was murdered before I was born.
What?
Yeah. And so he, being that he was murdered, I literally grew up without a father. And
do you know how he was murdered?
Yeah, he was stabbed to death outside of my grandmother's house.
Jesus.
And what's crazy is I actually grew up in that house. But yeah, that's
God. Wow.
And so being that I kind of understood what my childhood was like. I understood what it was like just as a kid in everyday, situations. I realized that I hated knowing that there were other kids out there that were going through that. And so when I was in life insurance, a friend of mine, he had actually, we sat down and we talked about why it is I do what I do. And I told him, I don't ever want to see another kid have to live the life that I did. I would rather have another kid have every opportunity, because what's interesting about my situation is my parents were actually approached to buy life insurance, and they both were like, nah, we're too young, we don't need it. And shortly thereafter, my father passed away. And so, had they done the proper planning, we would have had a much different life. But due to the improper planning, we had the life that we had. And I mean, it was a great childhood. There was a lot of fun involved in it. It's just, you spend every day in the hood. You spend every day in the hoods of Waianae, in the, Halava housing, and all of these different projects growing up, and you see it as normal. And then, you fast forward and come to find out, it's not normal.
No.
Like, that level of life is not a normal everyday thing.
Yeah, in a single parent household.
Yeah.
It's not just the dad left, but the dad died.
Yeah. And so that's been my burning drive, as far as I didn't like seeing kids end up in these situations where, the parents didn't plan properly. And because they didn't plan properly, now these kids are in situations where, they've got to now try to make the best with what they got.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, I was telling my son, kids don't make good decisions. You hope that they will.
They're kids. They're juveniles.
But yeah, at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever fear drives them to do. And so, you've got kids who are doing all kinds of goofy stuff that they don't know, that they know they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
But they're doing what they need to do to make ends meet. And so fast forward, I realized that all of the businesses that I work with, as far as the individuals that are within these businesses, they're all supporting these different families. And it all starts back with these families, as far as if the family's able to stay together, these kids have a better shot. And so that's kind of what started to pivot the focus, as far as, instead of just doing life insurance, it was, how do we find ways to make these companies work more efficiently? Because you see so many companies, especially now during this COVID time, where they're chopping staff, they're being very reactive.
They're not adapting properly.
Exactly. Whereas you have other companies that, literally this morning, I had lunch with a friend of mine, and his business is going through the roof. And it's literally because of proper planning.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, if you're able to fix the businesses, if you're able to fix the companies, that's going to help stabilize the families. That's going to help stabilize the foundation, which is going to hopefully help these kids.
Because you're kind of taking the stress off a little bit from the business aspect, so they're not worrying about so much.
Exactly. Because you figure, I grew up in a household where my mom was always having to work, and she was in the legal field. And so, being that she was always having to work in the legal field, she was not able to be around a lot. And, when the cat's away, and so I've gotten into
you guys go play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's, if you're able to stabilize whatever you can, and so that was kind of one of the things where, getting to work with Carlos, that's Carlos's background. Carlos he used to work with stuff like that and all of that. And so it's like, wow, and so it was a really good, I guess, pairing or partnership. Right. On the, I guess, business side of things, I'm a trained Lean Six Sigma black belt.
What is that? It sounds dangerous.
It's funny. Most people, when I say it, they're always like, "Oh, it's a martial art." Or I always get people saying, I'm a black belt in jujitsu.
Were you on the SEAL teams?
Yeah, no. Yeah. And it's like, no, dude, it has nothing to do with that. Yeah. So Lean methodology is from Toyota, and Six Sigma methodology is from Motorola. And so the Lean methodology, years ago, back when, after the whole war and everything, right? We dropped the bomb, the A bombs on Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki.
Okay.
And now fast forward, the war is over. Japan is trying to rebuild, reorganize, restructure, but their economy is devastated. Their factories are destroyed. They don't have the manpower. And so what do? And that's where the birth of Lean came into play. they realized that they needed to become extremely lean with their systems and make their systems work for them, but work in such a way where they're so efficient that they don't need to worry about, you know, what happens if so-and-so needs to take a day off or anything like that. While that was going on the opposite side of town, you've got Motorola, and Six Sigma is designed to remove variance. What you see happens a lot of times with businesses, especially American businesses, is they cut corners, they cut costs.
Okay.
And the way that they do it is they reduce their quality internally. And so what happens though is when you reduce your quality, you end up with situations like, you know, you get these spills happen. You get people who get really sick. You know, when you look at stuff like even the vaccines that came out, you know, who was it? Johnson and Johnson had to,
all those,
you know,
dirty, filthy labs and stuff.
Yeah, because of, you know, all of these like little screw ups all over the place, you know, and it's a matter of if you sacrifice quality, what you're eventually going to do is you're going to start killing people. You're going to start hurting people. And what Japan realized, or at least what Motorola realized, was that if you remove the variance, in other words, if you remove how often you get it right, and you just stay on trying to get it right every single time.
So wait, backtrack on that again. What was that?
So that's the Six Sigma side of things.
Right, but the variance was...
Yeah, so a lot of times, like, for instance, companies will, like, they'll make something, but it's not dead on exact.
Okay.
Kind of like, you know, when you get stuff from China, and, like, you've got the part where it's like...
you got 500 good ones and, like, 30 bad ones.
Exactly. And so what happens a lot of times is that 30 bad ones, they just are allowed to stay in the batch. They're allowed to stay in the queue, and they continue to move through. What Motorola decided was that 30 is costing us too much money. And so what they did was they tried to find a way to remove it to where literally, in order to be considered what we call a Six Sigma, you need to be 99.99966% accurate. In other words, if you were to, if you, let's say, made widgets, if you made 1 million widgets, there could only be 3.4 defects. And a defect doesn't mean that it's not usable. It means that might have a small scratch on it. So it's still usable. It's just got a defect.
Okay, so it's really, really specializing in narrowing down the perfection of whatever object it is.
It's the process that creates the object. So, like, for instance, when you look at, let's say, any business or even like your day-to-day life, when you look at getting up, most people, if you say, okay, tell me how many steps does it take to make a cup of coffee? You know, most people will say maybe 4 or 5. If you actually break the entire flow of things down, you end up with 10 to 15. The challenge is because of the variance as far as how you make coffee versus how I make coffee. So we do these things called value stream maps, where we go to your site or we go to your job or whatever we do, and we observe and we understand what it is you do, and we help identify the actual value that you bring based on what you do. Because a lot of times people, for instance, how does a bank teller know that they're doing a good job?
I don't know.
You know, like when you look at them, like, how do you measure a bank teller?
Maybe their balance at the end of the day is always accurate.
But that's about it, as far as you're hoping that their drawer is accurate.
Right.
But then if you're expecting everybody's drawer to be accurate. So again, how do you find somebody that's standing above and beyond everybody else? And those are those things that we try to help them figure out. How do you measure success for certain jobs? And so, like, in situations like those,
I was going to say, God, we need you guys in the city and county.
Well, so, like, for instance, with situations like those, we were working with a bank, and it was funny because we decided, all right, well, to find out if your tellers are having a good day, measure the amount of times you make a customer smile.
Oh.
And we created a threshold as far as what your upper spec limit is, what your lower spec limit is, what your average target is. And if you hit that, you've had a good day. Anything below, all right, well, let's look to improve. Anything above, you're doing great. And what we did was we started to tie in all of their bonuses and all of their good job things to that one metric
of making someone smile, making a customer smile,
of making customers happy.
Okay.
And so what happened was the tellers turned around and they actually started to do a lot more than just try to make their customers smile. They would really try to understand and get to know their customers. They would try to develop deeper relationships,
Right.
really emphasizing on that whole know your customer. And so it's things like that when, you know, how do you get people to work harder without paying them anything more? Because see, most businesses, especially right now during all of the COVID, they're trying to find ways to cut costs. They're trying to find ways to, you know, how do I squeeze more out of this one penny? And the easiest way to get more out of that one penny is find ways to make that penny move smoother. Find ways to streamline everything that penny touches. Find ways to literally make it to where you're not having to worry about what's going on your day-to-day operations.
Well, like for the metric of making the customer happy, is that something that works in other industries as well?
It does. It really just depends. So what we do is we try to figure out and understand what perfection looks like to you. And so whenever we meet with a new client, we want to understand what pure perfection looks like. Because in order for us to do our job, we need to get to 99.99966.
Find the perfect job and then break it down from there.
Exactly.
To what everybody else is doing.
Exactly. Oh, okay. So actually not even that. Let's say, for instance, in your line of work, right? I'm sure you've got forms or you've got things that you've got to take care of. What we want to know is, what does an absolute perfect form look like? What is an absolute, if you were to say this is pure perfection, what does that look like? And then we take that and we break that down. And then what we do is we systematically model perfection throughout the entire organization. That way people are able to, you know, think about it. You've got pro skiers, and anybody can learn to ski as long as you mirror what they're doing. Right. And so what we do is we teach them to mirror perfection.
Nice.
And yeah, that's.
It brings me back to that movie in the 80s where the car companies, this U.S. car company was taken over by the Japanese car company.
Which one?
Yeah. Think about it on the break. But yeah, we were just talking off camera during this quick break. Mike's a ninja. And not like the Three Ninjas or a Ninja Turtle, like legit trained from the old school, old world. What do you call it?
Yes. I'm actually a black belt in Ninjutsu, the art of the ninja. It's under Masaki Hatsumi Sensei, the Bujinkan.
Is it something you did here? Or did you go to Japan and have to do that? Like, what is the whole process behind that?
You know, we have a dojo here locally. So we still work off of the old school philosophies. And the art's never been turned into a sport. And so because it's never been turned into a sport, we do an extensive background check on anybody who wants to come in, because it's still taught with killing techniques.
Right, because ninjas are the assassins.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
They're trained to do legit damage,
Exactly.
not just, defensive and stuff like that. It's like, no. It's like, we're trained to go out there and kick your ass.
Yeah. But it's more of a, I mean, there are techniques that are attacking techniques, but the vast majority of it is a defensive art. And the reason is you want to be inconspicuous. You want to be concealed. You don't want people to see you or know that you've done anything. And so it's funny because a lot of our techniques are masked within things that you would think that we're calling for help, but we're, crushing parts of your body.
Like what?
Like, for instance,
that sounds cool. Like what does that mean?
So my kids, what's hilarious is, and this is probably horrible to share.
Do it. Share.
So my kids, growing up, they were always very well behaved, and it always appeared that they were just the most well-behaved kids, and they were just holding my hand. However, there's a point in your hand that if you just apply the right amount of pressure, it causes a massive amount of pain that shoots up your arm and causes your kind of almost to go blind.
Don't tell me you're doing this to your kids the whole time.
No. So what I do is I hold their hands and I literally just let my finger rest on top of the point. So they understand what the pain feels like because I train with the kids. I teach them how to move, how to adjust, how to adapt. And so they know all of these points because I've shown them that these points actually cause pain. And so growing up, they would hold my hand and they knew, I dare you to do something silly, because it'll be so much pain so quickly that they won't be able to respond. Like,
it's instant. It's right there. You're just squeezing your hand.
You know, like when you rip off a Band-Aid, that first shock of just pain.
Yeah.
But you don't have the ability, like there's no sound that comes out. And then as soon as you let go, the pain is gone and there's no sound that can come out because you're no longer painful, or like you're no longer in pain. So it's one of those very confusing moments. And so my kids have grown up their whole lives, even now to this day, where if, let's say, they're acting up, I'll just walk by them and gently tap them, and it looks like, oh, he just, you know, he just patted him on the back, and like my son's standing there like, I think I'm gonna die.
I'm paralyzed.
Yeah.
Death touch.
Yeah.
Dad hit me with the death touch.
Exactly. And so it's funny because I was just telling Carlos this the other day. So we were watching the news, and my son he was like, wow, Dad, the world is really scary. And so I told him, well, you need to be more aware of your surroundings. And he was like, oh, okay. And so then I walked away, and when I came back, I kind of did like a shadow boxing thing, but I went to hit several points on his body that would have caused him to die. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, you need to step up your game on defense. I just killed you 3 times. And he was like, what? And so what's been funny is,
like, Dad, you're not going to try to kill me for real.
yeah,
I know.
exactly. And so it's been funny because he's now getting a lot better to where, like, we'll walk past each other in the house and straight up try to kill each other. Just, you've got no more than 5 moves, and you have to try to end the other person.
And how does that go over?
It always ends
your wife say? Stop trying to kill each other. Literally.
Literally. That's actually how it goes.
We're here laughing about it. It's like somebody actually died.
Yeah. Like she's straight up like, sweetie, but why? I'm like, look, I'm not actually even touching him. And she's like, so I'm like, but why? I'm like, because he needs to be aware. I'm like, I'm messing with him so he understands where the points are. Like, but him just being aware of what's going on around him has made him a much better, more efficient sitter whenever he's out with people.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like, thinking. Yeah, he's thinking a lot more critically about being safe with his sisters or with his friends or anything like that. And so a lot of times he's very much the voice of reason for his friends, but at the same time he's the voice of chaos. And it all started when he used to come with me to my dojo all the time, and our Shihan, our instructor, was like, do you think he'd be interested in, just trying? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we started to get him to play and do stuff. And then the next thing we know, we all sit down in class one day, and my Shihan calls my son up and hands him with a certificate, or a menkyo rather, from Japan. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, your son is now the youngest recognized American ninja. And I was like, oh.
That's cool. How old is your son at the time?
He was 12 at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so, I shared that with him, and his head went so big.
He's like, I'm a ninja.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, stop. But what slowed his training down was at the same time he was in a karate. And I used to tell him that he's not allowed to use ninjutsu in karate, because karate it's got rules. There are forms and techniques and certain things that cause points and all of that. And so, he could seriously hurt somebody. And he was in a kumite match, a sparring match. And the kid that he was going up against went to kick, and my son stepped out, and instead of defending like he would karate style, he stepped back and defended ninjutsu style.
So what did he do?
So karate, normally if somebody goes to kick, you would, down block or something like that. My son caught his foot with his foot. So he literally caught his foot, got his foot with the back of his foot.
He lifted his leg to check it?
No, but he dragged it down and put the child on, like literally
split
it. Yeah.
Ouch.
And then when he did that, he went and he backhanded the kid in the face. And so, of course, deduction, because you're not allowed to do any of that.
I'm like, the ref is like, 3 points.
And so I look at my son and I'm like, no ninpo. And he's like, yes, Dad. And he turns around and the kid throws a punch and my son defends against it again, ninjutsu style, where, you know, he just slides off and slaps him in the face again. I'm like, dude, stop playing with this kid. I'm like, stop playing with this kid. Stop being that guy. You know, so now I'm standing there being that parent, right? Looking at my kid like, what are you doing?
Dial it down.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so I'm like, all right. So at the end of the tournament, I'm like, all right, you got to pick either ninjutsu or karate. But I was like, I can't teach you ninjutsu if you're going to be using it in karate. You're going to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're too young to understand to control that.
Can you use ninjutsu, or have you seen any like mixed martial artists using ninjutsu? Can you use it in that?
It's if you're part of the Bujinkan, you're not supposed to ever. It's not allowed. But there have been others who have like they've trained through us and then they've opened up their own styles. Because it's really a no.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I mean, if you can just touch a guy,
yeah,
and drop him.
we still. So our dojos here locally are still connected to the dojos in Japan, and so our soke, or not soke, but our sensei that are here, our shihan, they still fly to Japan and train under the soke that's still living, and so they'll go out there, they'll pick up new techniques, come back, and then they do all of that fun stuff.
So do you bring teachings from ninjutsu into the business world?
I do.
What kind of stuff?
It's a lot of the discipline as far as, you know, understanding that you've got the ability to do all of this chaos, but being able to contain it in that you see a lot of times, especially with, you know, when dealing with the workforce, right? When we come in dealing with an organization, we start out at the top and we cascade down. And a lot of times when you're talking to the top, they have a very different perspective of what's going on down below.
Of course, absolutely.
And so it's interesting when you're able to go into the field with all of these people and understand that there are people who really, really care about the organization, but they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And they don't have the proper, let's say, tools or training, or they don't have the authority, or they don't have the ability to make these changes. And so you've got these people who are down there who get these messages from up high. And these messages are produce more, work harder, be faster.
Do more with less.
Exactly. And the people down below are like, how?
Yeah.
How do we do this? And so, you know, and taking a lot of the teachings of the ninjutsu and the philosophies of being able to literally find that balance. With all martial arts, they, you know, it's taught that you're not supposed to be going out just wreaking havoc, right? You know, it's about the discipline, the control, and being able to, you know, understand that you have that ability, but you choose not to do it. Right. And so with the organizations that we deal with, it's understanding that these guys below, if they wanted, they could cause all of the chaos that you guys believe they're creating.
They could shut down factories.
Exactly.
Or like a police department could go like blue flu. Everybody calling sick.
Exactly.
You know, something like that.
Exactly. And the reality is they don't. They're showing up because they give a damn about your business. It's just they don't have the tools necessary. And so if we're able to come in and say, all right, dude, calm down. Don't go postal. You know, let's figure out what is it that you're doing. Tell me about your job. You know, help me understand what it takes to do what you do. One of our past clients years ago, it's funny because it was a small mortgage brokerage and they had four loan processors. And getting to meet the ownership was like, it's, you know, it's this, it's that, what have you. We got to meet the management team and the sales team, and everybody's got, you know, it's this thing and that. But none of them could understand why they weren't able to break through these production thresholds.
Okay.
And so, you know, one of the consistencies from all of the people across the room was they all said that something had to do with the processors. And so we're like, okay, well, let's find out about the processors. And so we sat down and we watched what the processors did. And what we found
processors
was
are the machines or
the
people?
the people.
Okay.
And so these are the people in the back office that, so the loan officer, they go get the loan, right, from whomever, and then they put all of the paper together and they submit it, and there's a person in the back that now goes out and gets all the documentation, requests the underwriting and all of this other stuff. And so those are the processors.
Okay.
And so what everybody was blaming the processor, saying that it was their issue, their fault. And so when we went back there and just watched them, come to find out, one processor, what this one was doing was she would actively access the queue. And so whenever like she would finish up what she could do with this loan, she would close it, go back into the queue, grab the next one, bring it out, and just start working.
Okay.
The other 3 processors were trained that you don't actively access the queue unless you're emailed. And so they're waiting for an email from a loan officer to come in to tell them,
look at the queue.
Exactly. And when they get the email, they go in and they grab that specific file. But that's it. Once they're done with your file, they close out and they wait. And so it was funny because when we looked at what they did, you had one processor who was kicking out 17 loans a month. Mm-hmm. You had 3 others that were kicking out anywhere between 3 to 8 a month. And it was just because
they didn't get the email.
Yeah, they didn't get the email.
It's like, well, I get told to do that, so I didn't do it.
Exactly. And so we sat down and it was like, all right, well, do you retrain 3, retrain 1, or not have to retrain anyone? And so we decided, let's go with the route of not retraining anyone. So we went into their system and we taught the system to automatically email you as soon as you close the file.
Okay, so changing the environment to work for them. Okay.
Exactly. So when they closed the file, it would email them the next file. And so now you've got the 3 processors all at the exact same pace as this one that was just cranking everything out.
And you'd think it's common sense to do that, work productivity, but it's not.
It isn't. It isn't. And it's because people are so used to doing things the way they've always done.
I say people are lazy. Like humans are genuinely lazy, and they're greedy. You know, and it takes special people to come in there and say, hey, you need to get this stuff done to help everybody else, or to do your job, finish your job.
It's funny because so one of the Lean Six Sigma philosophies is people are not the problem. It's the process that's the problem.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that is if you have a poor process, it allows for people to behave poorly.
Yep.
You tighten up the process and the poor performers will weed themselves out. They go away. And it was funny because with that mortgage brokerage, in them being able to make that one change, they generated an additional $400,000 in revenue.
Jesus.
And it was just that one tiny tweak. But it's stuff like that where a lot of business owners spend so much time in the business that they don't take the time to look at it from the outside in. One of a story that I normally always tell our clients is I had a friend years ago, she was cooking like a Thanksgiving or Christmas ham or something. And she pulled the ham out and she cut the butt off and threw it away. And her daughter looked at her and was like, why do you do that? And she's like, I don't know. You got to ask your grandma. It's her recipe.
She's always done that.
Yeah. That's what we do. That's how we make this ham. Like, all right, cool. And so the daughter went and asked the grandma, well, why is it that we do this? And the grandma was like, well, growing up, we were poor. So we only had this small pan. So in order for the ham to fit, we'd have to cut the butt off. And that's why we do it.
And there's no rhyme or reason to doing it other than that. And
exactly.
Nowadays you have a big oven and you're still cutting off the butt of the ham.
Exactly. And so you've got a lot of businesses and people who just do things like this because this is how it's always done.
That's the way it always has been. That's the way it always has been. That's the way we've always done it. That's the way we're going to do it. It's like, hey, that's not necessarily the best way.
Exactly. And so what we do is, but what we do is when we go in, we ask them, what does perfection look like? Because if you can tell me what perfection looks like, we can create the process to outline that so that your whole team can mimic perfection. That way, you guys are all doing the exact same thing. There's no variance, or at least a very reduced amount of variance. And you're getting people to do a lot more without paying them any more, without having to ask any additional favors or anything like that. They're literally doing their job.
And the employees are happier for it.
Exactly. Because now they feel much more relevant. They feel like they're tied into the business because you're measuring them.
Yeah.
What's funny is, I was watching this employee today. I had to go get gas, and so there was this employee at the gas station, and she was literally standing outside in her neon vest, and she was just playing on her cell phone. And I was looking at her. My wife is like, she's like, wow, that's a pretty dope job. And I was like, she's just standing there getting paid to play on her phone. I was like, well, whereas if you just fine tune the process, if you fine tune the things that they did, you could find a way to make her a lot more valuable. But right now, you've just got her wasting money.
She's just a traffic cone.
Yeah.
Standing out there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So through all the businesses and the ninjutsu training and stuff like that, you have like this fantastic backstory. But I kind of wanted to hit on and touch on and ask you, like, do you have an overall life philosophy that you follow with life and business?
Design a life you love.
Ooh, like
one of the biggest things is you see so many people who literally they give up on what their goals and their dreams are, or they settle, they just accept defeat, they're okay with it.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is if you're able to just kind of figure out what it is you want to do and actually go after it. I think Jim Carrey said it best, you can fail at doing something you don't like. So why not try doing something you love? And that's kind of how we, I try to live my life, where you're literally trying to design a life that you love, every single aspect of it. In my house anyway, we strive for perfection, even though we understand that perfection is not possible, but it's something to strive for, because then you're always trying to become better. And so, like, for instance, with my kids, they all understand that, like, if you're going to show me your class work, if it's not worth an A, why'd you even bother doing it? And, when it's funny, because other people, when they look at it, they're like, dude, that's harsh. And it's like, well, no, it's teaching them quality. It's teaching them the ability to not just give up and give in for, because a lot of times they'll sit there and they'll find other things to do. If you give somebody 3 hours, they'll complete it in 3 hours. If you give somebody in 3 weeks, they'll complete it in 3 weeks.
Right.
And so it's a matter of changing that mindset and understanding that I need to do what needs to be done now. That way I can move on to the other things. I can do the things that I want to do. And so if you're not going to put in quality, what's going to happen is somebody's going to have to come back and do it again anyway. And so, and kind of just working along that path of always trying to improve. There are times where you do kind of get that gut check when it's something that you have to personally change. Cause like when my wife and I met, I was fresh out of the Marine Corps. And so I was reckless and just, and all around just nut job, right?
It's all gung ho.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's funny because I always pick on my wife, and I told her, like, I'm always impressed that you stick around, and so I just appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around. But what's funny is I always tell her I don't trust her judgment, and she's like, "Why don't you trust my judgment?" I'm like, "Because you married me."
That's harsh.
I'm like, you said yes to me. You had the pick of the litter, and you were like, I want that one. It's like, I don't trust your judgment. And it's funny because Carlos will never say it because he's too nice. But everybody who meets my wife, they always look at her, then they look at me, and they're like, how the hell? Like, and I'm like, well, I keep her drugged.
And you're a fucking ninja.
Yeah.
You're a ninja.
Like, anytime she starts to kind of come out of it, I'm like, oh, drink your juice.
Killer. Like, give her the little death touches to put her back to sleep.
No, she's a boxer. I'll never forget, years ago, I mean, we were brand new dating. And it was our very first argument, and she was so mad at me. I don't remember what I did. And what was funny was she went to punch, and I moved out of the way, and she stood there, and, I was expecting normal words like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've tried to hit you. I'm so sorry. Something along those lines. She stopped and looked at me and was like, how did you see that? I never telegraph. And I was like, well, It's like, actually,
You
like,
kind of did,
kind of trained for that sort of thing, but that was impressive. And quite frankly, I think that was sexy.
but you still missed.
Yeah, exactly. So she's looking at me. She's like, and that was kind of that moment. And then I looked at her right then, and I told her, I was like, "Will you marry me?" And she said, "We've been dating for 2 weeks. Are you high?" I was like, "So is that a yes?" And so it's funny because
here you are.
Yeah, so we've been together now 16 years. At 16 years, 3 kids later, and I told her I love you to death. I don't trust your judgment.
Does she still miss when she throws it?
Oh no. Now, and what made it worse was I decided to start teaching her ninjutsu, because one of the things that she and I discussed was we didn't want our kids to ever feel scared. We wanted them to at least feel okay to be anywhere they are and know that they can at least defend themselves, or at least in some way take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because in teaching them, I would also teach my wife. And so there would be times where like she'll walk by and just, because she thinks it's funny. There's a point on the top of your foot that if you hit it just right, you will drop a person. Like they just collapse.
Move my feet away from him.
This one time, just because she thought it'd be funny, as I was walking by her, she used one of my wooden training swords and just went whack and hit me right on the top of the foot. And I dropped. And my eyes are filling up with tears. And she's like, "Stop being a baby." And I'm like, "I'm going to die." And my foot starts swelling. And
my God.
And she's like, "Wow. All right." It's like, "So it does work."
You want some ice?
Yeah. And I'm like, "Are you serious?" She's like, "Quit being such a pussy." I'm like, "All right, I get it."
Tape it up, walk it off.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is like, she'll always use me being a Marine against me. Like if there's ever a time where I'm on the ground, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "Oh, big bad Marine, huh?" You know what? I'm fine. And she's like, No. Go ahead, lay back down. It's okay. The Marine Corps is okay. They'll suffer. I'm like, like, I guess this is the best the Marine Corps kicks out, huh? I'm like, wow.
Wow. I don't even know where to take that conversation.
Yeah. And so she's gotten much better. When we first started dating, like her insults would be like, "You smell like broccoli." These days, she's like, "I got your soul." Dude. She's like, "Play with me."
It's like, we have digressed so far from business.
I know, right?
But that's you, right? That's who you are. That's your background. That's part of your family right there that you've been able to share with us.
Yeah. It's, it's just I guess kind of the way that we always pick on each other. It's, we're trying to make one another better. And so like every step of the way, it's always about how do you improve? What can you do better? What can you do differently that's going to make that you just did 10 times better? Like for instance, right before I left earlier today, my daughter brought over her assignment, and there was a bunch of like misspelled words and stuff like that. And so I told her, I was like, "Well, aren't you supposed to didn't we teach you to write everything on a separate sheet of paper first? Once we have your thoughts organized and cleared out, then we transpose it onto the actual final sheet." She was like, "Yeah, but I already knew what I wanted to say." And so I was like, "Yeah, but you misspelled all of your words."
But it's all messed up.
And so I was like, "Well, now you need to erase everything and start over." And she's like, "But Dad," I'm like, "Remember, we said quality. So you should have done quality to begin with." It's like, but this is what happens when you don't put up quality first. If you don't put quality to begin with, you're going to eventually have to put it up. And so do you want to put it up on the front end and be done with it, and now you can do the things you want to do? Or do you want to put it up on the back end while all of your friends are off doing the stuff that that they want to do, and you're stuck sitting inside because you didn't do the job right?
And I think that's so important for anybody watching this show that might think about, getting into your business or hiring you guys, that they can really see that you take these lessons to heart, and you're bringing the lessons from home to the job and from the job to home, and that you live these principles. You're not just talking the talk.
Yeah, it's funny. There's this thing called Imposter Syndrome, right? Where as you get into certain things, you start to doubt yourself and your ability and all of that fun stuff. And so I've for the longest time used to constantly just suffer with that whole imposter thing, right? And then one of my mentors, who's a master black belt, kind of sat me down and was like, dude, you live a very efficient life. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, everything that you do is dialed down to a science. Like, you know, for instance, every morning we wake up, and my daughter, my youngest, she, for a little while, she was completely anti-vegetables. Like, she was just
like any young kid.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not eating vegetables. And like, we tried giving her a carrot, she gagged. And so we figured out, okay, well, how do we get these veggies in her? And so we started blending them every morning.
Sure.
So we make these green smoothies, and we call it muscle juice. And so it's funny because every morning the kids start their morning with muscle juice at 7 a.m. And it doesn't matter what they did last night. Like, if you went to bed at 5 in the morning, I don't care. The day starts at 7. And so plan your day wisely, plan your night wisely. And so it's funny because we try to give them that space to do what they need to do.
Make their own decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they make poor decisions, we let them know, like, you messed up here. You could have done this better. This would have made more sense. To where now, like, for instance, when they come to us with issues, typically it's an issue that either they're fighting with each other, which is just, you know, regular sibling banter, or it's something that they really don't know how to overcome this. And one of the cool parts about it is when they come to us, they give us all of the paths that they've already tried.
Okay.
And so it makes it a lot faster when we sit down and we talk to them. Because, you know, a lot of times as parents, where, you know, you see your kid and they're flipping out, like, what's going on? You know, they're like, oh, I can't do this. And rather than ask them, well, what have you tried to do, like, to get there? As parents, we're like, you know, you don't want to see your kid suffer, so you just quickly fix it for them, or you do it for them.
But that doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so in us asking them, well, what have you tried? Because we know the solution. It's just a matter of getting them to start thinking along the path of, how do I continuously adjust this? How do I continuously tweak this to get to where I need to be?
Do you guys do any parent coaching also?
No.
Is that anything? Yeah, I was just like, wow, this is like some good stuff. I'm going to write some of this down.
All we do is we take the Lean Six Sigma methodology and we apply it at home. You know, we try to eliminate any type of waste. Waste is identified with an acronym called downtime. And so in each letter, we're able to identify types of waste that cause variance, that cause delays, that cause slowdowns. And so it's funny because, like, one of the things that we do with companies that we work with is we create what we call a Kanban, which is a visual management system.
Okay.
And so think about it kind of like a traffic light. You know, how do you know that it's time to go forward? The light
turns green.
Green. And so that's a Kanban. And so what we do whenever we're working with clients is we create these visual management systems where literally anyone at any moment can quickly take one glance and know exactly where their business is. And what it does is it makes things so much faster, because now, like, for instance, when you're in a board meeting and everybody's getting together, in most situations, what happens in these meetings is everybody reports, and as they report, they explain their report.
Okay.
And the challenge is that takes up so much time,
right?
Because people are sitting there trying to defend their reasoning or what have you,
or make themselves look good, or
exactly.
whatever.
And so what we do is we flip it to where we say, okay, when you're reporting, you're giving us a color or a number. And so if you're on track, you're green. If you're on track, but let's say, for instance, you're waiting for something, you're yellow. If you're not on track or you can't move, you're red. And so now whenever they're reporting, as we're looking down, let's say, for instance, 20 items, you're not saying, okay, item number 1, I'm this, and this is because. It's go down your list. So now you're going, all right, 1 green, 2 yellow, red, 3 red, so on and so forth. And as you're going down, all we're doing is we're writing down anything that's not green. And then when you're done, we move to the next person.
Wow. Okay.
And then when everybody's done with their reports, now we can circle back and say, okay, all of our reds, what are the most critical? And then they say, okay, these are the most critical. Great. What do we need to do to get your red back on track? Oh, well, I need this, this, and this. Great. Can you guys help with these things? And all it's doing is it's helping the team communicate with one another, but they're all problem solving together. Because a lot of times, especially as people, we spend so much time trying to protect ourselves from our coworkers because we think that everybody's out to get us.
And there's a little competition going.
Exactly.
Right.
And so when we tell them that, it's not the people that are the problem, it's the process. If you allow me to fine tune your process, you'll become worth a lot more than what they're saying you're worth right now. Because a lot of times you'll see somebody who has the skill set, but maybe they're missing this one thing or that thing that could push them into the next level. And so when we work with them, it's how do we teach you to gain that one skill to help push you to that next level? Because you can easily do everything else. And so it's just a matter of, again, applying it to your day-to-day life. We do things like, for instance, my wife, she actually created a Kanban at work. Biggest reason is she was saying that anytime her boss or somebody else comes around and she's not at her desk, they're always like, oh, where'd she go? And so what she did was she created a chart that basically, where she could be. And so whenever she gets up to leave, she quickly just moves her tag from one spot to another.
Oh, so she's not even having to write it down. She's just moving the tags.
Exactly.
Bathroom.
Exactly.
Lunchroom.
Exactly.
Home.
Yeah. No, and so it's funny because what it's done is it's made her team so much faster with their communicating.
Right.
To where literally
I love that.
Yeah. And so it's hilarious because her coworkers, some of them used to get offended on behalf of her. And they'd be like, why do they need to know? And so it's funny because when my wife and I were talking about it, I told her, I was like, well, what did you tell them? And she was like, I told them the truth. I said, they're paying me to be here. They should know. And I was like, good answer.
Yeah.
They're paying you to do a job. They're not paying you to hang out. One of our clients, it was funny because it used to take them 18 days to get from the warehouse to their clients as far as all of their products.
Okay.
And so the products would come in from the wholesalers, they would do all of their stuff, and then they would send it out to their clients. And it was taking 18 days. And so when we sat down and we decided, okay, let's watch your people move. And so just on a curiosity, we're like, okay. And so as we were watching these teams move, we realized that there are these 6 people that constantly walk down this one path. And when they walk down this one path, they stop at every station to talk story with everybody else. And so what we did was we moved the stations that they were walking to. We moved it from where it was to where they are. And it shaved off 3 days. It literally went from 18 days to 15 days. And it had nothing to do with us changing the way they did thing or nothing.
Just the environment.
It was literally, we just said, well, if you move that closer, now these guys don't have to walk that far. And it eliminates them stopping to talk story with everybody. And so, but it's stuff like that where, if you just kind of pay attention to the way things move, you find ways to fix it all over.
Mike, it's been so good having you on, brother. We're almost out of time here, but man, any last words?
No. I feel like I've talked your ear off.
But it's been good. So knowledgeable, so much value from this episode. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yes.
Truly grateful.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Everybody, Mike Roura. And as always, stay happy, hoy. Gotta throw the shotguns. There you go. All right.